Hey guys, it's Sebastian from AskSebby, and today we are going to look at the landscape for secured cards in 2019. We did do a video like this in 2017, and there have been a few changes. The two major ones is that the Bank of America card no longer charges an annual fee. The second one is just a general change in the landscape for certain cards like the Discover It card that previously had really good return protection, price protection, and all the other benefits that we talked about that no longer exist. It's still a good card, but not the obvious pick that it was back then. For this video, we are going to look into the basics of the card, the graduation details, the product change options, and also how I would rate them. If you want to look at the big chart yourself, feel free to go to a blog post down below. It's going to be the first link in the description box. For anyone new to the channel, we talk about credit cards and also how to use them towards things like travel. For people who've been around the block, who've been around for a while, feel free to leave your experiences with different banks down below just because it's going to be helpful for new people. Also, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. In terms of the basics, for the minimum security deposit, the good one here is going to be Capital One. The big reason here is because they have a very low minimum, but I would argue that it doesn't really matter that much. I get that people are excited to start the credit process as soon as possible, but an additional $100 or $150 isn't that substantive that I would pick one card over another card. In terms of the maximum security deposit, higher is better, but again, I also wouldn't worry about this too much. The main reason is because secured cards are a stepping stone into unsecured cards, into substantially better ones, so there's no reason to lock up a lot of money for who knows how long for some of the issuers, or for maybe 12 months, 8 months, whatever amount of time, because you don't need to do that. It's a stepping stone. Just do what you need to do to pass the course and then move on to what really matters. Think of it as a pass-fail course rather than something where you actually have a grading. In terms of annual fees, none of these cards have annual fees other than US Bank and Wells Fargo. One other section you might be curious why I'm not going to include is going to be the APR, and the main reason is because whether it's 20, 25, 30%, I don't think you should be paying an APR anywhere near that. To me, the point of secured cards is to learn how to use credit cards responsibly, so you don't want to pay any interest at all because it doesn't make sense. I think it's fine to pay interest on cars if you need a car to get to work. I think it makes sense for mortgages. It might make sense for business purposes, for business loans, but for credit cards, personal credit cards at crazy rates, even like 10%, doesn't really make sense. The main reason is because there's nothing you can do with that money to earn more than 10% back. The rewards here are zero across the board other than Discover. With Discover, you're going to earn 2% back on gas and dining on up to $1,000 to spend per quarter. On everything after that, and also on anything else, you're going to earn 1% back. Discover also has something called cashback match, meaning that they match the cash back that you have in the first year. So 2% is really 4% and 1% is really 2%. Discover obviously wins here because no one else has anything, but remember to consider how much you currently spend. If you're a student, if you don't spend that much, even 2%, 4% might not matter as much as you think it does. It's still better than nothing, but I want you guys to think long term. Before I dive into the other sections, in case you are going to rush off to apply for a card, if you want to learn more about any of these cards and you want to support our channel, pretty easy way to do that would be to use the links on our sites or the links in the description box down below. Moving on to graduation, this is when they turn your secured card into an unsecured card. For a lot of issuers, the process of doing this is pretty similar to applying for a new card, so you need to make sure that your ducks are in order. For some issuers, they will not graduate you if you have a prior bankruptcy, if you have a lot of missed payments, if you have anything that looks bad that would raise flags anywhere else. So even if you have another issuer card where you have missed payments or you have a lot of debt over there, that's a big concern. If you're someone who only pays the minimum, or maybe you only pay 2x the minimum and you don't pay off your cards in full, that's also another red flag. As a reminder, the point of secured cards is to prove that you can be trusted with unsecured cards. Oftentimes, once you start getting cards, you're looking at $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 in credit limits per card. For Capital One, there is not a timeline, and it really depends on you. If you go online, you can find a lot of data points of people who don't get graduated, and you also find people who do. So it's a mixed bag. I would be more concerned here. For Citi, they do have a set timeline of 18 months, but they do early graduations, and odds are pretty high because I think everyone gets upgraded. The main reason I think this is because for everyone else, they have terms saying that they have the right to not upgrade you, but for Citi, they don't really mention it. There might be some weird edge cases where they still don't upgrade you, but the fact that it's not in the terms is probably a good sign. For Discover, they typically upgrade you in 8 months, and my understanding is that they don't do early graduations anymore just because 8 months is relatively short already. US Bank is typically 12 months, and odds really depend on your credit score and stuff like that. For Wells Fargo, there's no timeline. The next section is going to be product change options once a secured card becomes an unsecured card. The main reason we want to look at this is because there might be cards that offer substantially better rewards. One thing to be aware of is that we're not going to be able to dive through all of the details here because there's a lot of information. We probably have a blog post or a video for each of these cards. For Bank of America, I would product change to the Cash Rewards card, which is also known as the 321 card because it has pretty good rewards rates. For Capital One, I would probably product change to the Adventure One card, which has a partnership right now with Hotels.com. For Citi, I would do the Double Cash card if you want a basic 2% back card, or the Dividend card if you want a 5% all-arounder card. For Discover, the Discover It card makes a lot of sense. It's also a 5% rotating category card. US Bank, Cash Plus card, same exact thing, 5% card. For Wells Fargo, Propel probably makes the most sense. One thing to be careful with for Wells Fargo is that there are data points online saying that when you do product changes, they close the old card and open a new card. I'm not sure if it happens to everyone, but it's just something to be cognizant of. So when you call in, make sure that they don't mention that. If they do, then it might make sense to not product change your card if you've had it for a while, or to product change it as soon as possible. That way the close and the reopen happens sooner rather than later. The main idea is that you don't want to close a card that's very old. So if it's 4 or 5 years old, you probably want to leave it alone. The final section is how I would personally rate the cards. And for me, I think any of the cards on the left do very well. The funny thing too is that this is technically alphabetically, so it's interesting that the two ones that I would not recommend are on the right. I think you can make arguments for all of these cards, so it just really depends on you. For Bank of America, I think it makes sense if you're someone who wants to build a relationship with them, just because a lot of people do struggle with approvals due to a lack of a relationship. So even if you build out a lot of cards, if you have a good credit score, you might have to open a checking account and put in $2,000 to $3,000 in to get approved for cards because of how stringent they are about that relationship. For Capital One, I think it makes a lot of sense in the long term as long as your card gets graduated. Kind of the same idea where if you have a good score, if you have a lot of other cards, it gets a bit more difficult to get approved for Capital One cards, so having your foot in the door is good. The main consideration there though is whether they graduate you. I think as long as you keep your utilization very, very low and you do everything else right, you should be fine. For Citi, I think it makes a lot of sense because there's two very good product change options, and both of those cards can be played in a lot of ways. The thing that's not as good is that the graduation timeline is 18 months, but early graduations do happen, so less of a risk if you have everything lined up. For Discover, I think it makes sense all the way through if you don't mind having a Discover card. If I was starting from scratch, I would look into Bank of America, Citi, as well as Discover, the rationale being that you have very good product change options afterwards, and there's a set graduation timeline. I'm kind of scared of the Capital One and the fact that they have nothing because they could always just choose to delay it, but your mileage may vary. Do what makes sense for you. On that note, if you do want to learn more about any of these cards and you want to support our channel, pretty easy way to do that would be to use the links on our sites or the links in the description box down below. Hopefully that was helpful, and my question for you guys is, what are your thoughts on these cards? Which ones did you pick? Which one would you pick again? Or maybe you're starting out right now, which one are you considering? Let me and the community know down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, it really helps us out. If you know anyone else who'd benefit from what we just talked about, feel free to share this video with them because it's probably going to help them out. But otherwise, hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.